Hello, this is Nicole. Welcome to my channel and to the final part of the Walking Forest project. In this video, I'm making the last character in a company of 4 magical creatures, each one a part of an enchanted forest. This creature I'm making here is neither old, nor wise, or fairy, nor did it emerge from the forest itself like the previous 3. It's a more humble being made by human hands, a cabin in the woods. Well, naturally it's not that simple. This house will be on legs, and there is a reason for that, but I'll explain as we go along. I started by drawing a very simple sketch to use as a reference image. The reason I made it so basic is simply because I just can't do any better. Honestly, this is my best. I have a very low threshold when it comes to drawing skills. I'm using cardboard from a pizza box to build the shape of the house according to my original spectacular design. I tried to do things properly, so I took my measurements and made an effort to be precise despite my awkward history with taking measurements. I glued the cardboard pieces using hot glue, trimmed my measurements mistakes, added one last piece for the roof, and the main structure of the house was done. Well, the next day things didn't look quite the same. I got the impression that the house looked too housey. I wanted to look more like a living, moving creature, so I started again. Round 2, back to my drawing skills. This time I allowed myself to be more loose and I avoided straight lines and symmetry altogether. I wanted to create the impression of flexibility and therefore mobility. After all, this house will be on legs and it will be moving all around the forest. It was worth the try. I like the second version much better. Next part is the woodwork, starting with the frames for the door and the windows. I'm using balsa wood for that because it's so soft and easy to cut. I drew the door frame and patiently cut it out using my X-Acto knife. After that, I softened the edges to make it look more natural, and then I glued it on the cardboard using wood glue. Then I moved on to the window frames. I wanted to add some variety to the design, so I used tiny pieces of wood to create the frame for the front round window. The result was a bit funny looking, but I actually like it. I continued with the rest of the frames using broken pieces of wood to make them look old and worn out. Time for experiments.
Experiments?
I wanted to create wooden planks to cover the rest of the house, so I decided to use popsicle sticks. But popsicle sticks are hard and not so easy to cut, so I soaked them in water to make them softer. The result was quite satisfying. It was indeed much easier to cut them with scissors, but it was still time-consuming, so I tried using my crafty knife, and it actually worked quite well. I let them dry and then started gluing them one by one onto the little house. I didn't bother making the planks symmetrical or even. Actually, I aimed for the opposite. This is an old cabin in the woods, not some fancy villa, so I wanted it to look a little bit crooked. I covered the front, the back and one of the side walls, and then I decided to make a small change to my original design. I switched sides for the little extra room I wanted to build. It's going to be one of those charming polygonal rooms you often see in old houses, the kind I've always been drawn to. Actually, I used to live in a house with a room like that, and I remember how proud I felt. It made the house feel special. Its construction is going to be a little different from the rest of the house. The main feature will be 3 large tall windows resting on low stone walls. It's the kind of room where you'd curl up on a rainy day with a warm cup of tea, listening to the soft sound of raindrops and looking out at the trees, dancing in the wind. Once again, I used balsa wood to create the beams that will support the glass panes. They are thicker than popsicle sticks and therefore more suitable for that purpose. Then I took a short break from building the room and jumped into texturing the wooden planks on the rest of the house. I used to do that with a chisel, but this time I decided to try it with my micromotor, and it was an excellent choice. I textured the entire house in just a few minutes. The downside of this process is that after using the micromotor, I had to do a bit of sanding to remove all the splinters, something that's not necessary when I use a chisel. But still, it was faster overall, so I'm going to adopt this new technique. And back to the cute side room. I continued by adding the rest of the wooden beams and then moved on to creating the low stone walls. For that, I reached for my leftover XPS foam. XPS is the best material to create stones with. I cut 3 small pieces out of it and then using a fine-tipped marker I first draw the stones. Applying a little more pressure, I kind of carved them into the foam. At the end, I deepened the engraving using my X-Acto knife. The result was a cute, funny little stone wall. Since I was satisfied with that, I went on and created 2 more. I glued them in place using wood glue, and the main construction of this side room was complete. I then added 3 small wooden pieces on each of the 3 stone walls to make the window sills. As you've probably noticed, I haven't measured anything, and the seats aren't quite even, but honestly, I don't care. I'm going freestyle.
Alright, go with that! Everybody freestyle!
Time to deal with the edges of the house. I can't just leave them like that, it looks so fake. I ran into a problem here. I would have loved to use wood for that, but the edges are curved and I'm not sure I'll be able to cut pieces of wood that fit perfectly and look nice without losing the curve. So I decided to use air dry clay instead and texture it in a way that will look like wood. I like the outcome. I believe after painting it will look like raw natural wood. Now, let's move to the other side. I want to create a small veranda, an open space with a roof, an outdoor place where one can just relax enjoying the view of the forest. I'm making a small roof out of cardboard, which I carefully crumpled and shaped to give it a crooked, worn look, just like the rest of the house. I glued it in place with hot glue and then supported it using two small wooden beams. It really adds to the charm of the whole building. Moving on to building the door. It's going to be wooden, of course. I'm using the piece of cardboard I cut out at the beginning as a template to create the door shape on balsa wood. This wood is so soft, which allows me to simulate wooden planks by engraving them with a simple pencil, and it's so soft that it broke during the process. But that gave me an idea. I used this little accident to my advantage and carved a small hole in the door to make it look even older and more weathered. Sometimes little accidents during the process actually create new possibilities. So it's good to keep an open mind and be ready to make small or even not so small changes to the original design. I have to admit, I love this unexpected hole in the door. It really adds character. Let's climb onto the roof. I'm creating a hole on one side. It will be the part where the roof collapsed. I find it so charming whenever I see old houses in villages with holes in the roofs where you can see the wooden frame underneath. It makes me feel tender towards them. Once I removed the cardboard from the hole, I glued 3 wooden planks underneath to form part of the wooden frame supporting the roof. Since the roof is curved, I carefully snapped the straight wooden planks in a way that allowed them to bend without breaking completely, so they would fit properly along the curve. After that, I glued the roof onto the main structure of the house. Wooden details. I glued small pieces of wood underneath the eaves to simulate the wooden beams that support the entire roof structure, adding realism to the build. And then I moved on to the last part of the construction, the platform that the house will be built on, a simple structure made of popsicle sticks. Now it's time for the roof tiles, and let me introduce you to one of my craziest ideas. So here's what happened. The other day I was in my kitchen cleaning and organizing my cupboards when I stumbled across some hilopites, which is kind of Greek egg noodles. I had no idea how they got there. It was one of those moments when you discover unbelievable stuff hidden in the kitchen cupboards without any memory of buying them. I was ready to throw them away when I had an epiphany. I could use them as tiles for some future miniature project. And here we are. They are beautiful, aren't they? Each piece is so organic, I just love it. When it came to polygonal room though, I decided to go with a wooden roof. I thought my hilopites would be too big for this small building, so I covered the roof with small wooden planks instead. Okay, the house is ready. Now it's time for one of the most enjoyable parts of the whole crafting process, painting. I'm starting by painting the inside black because I don't want any ugly details to be visible through the windows. After that, I moved on to the outside, and let myself freely improvise with the colors. I just knew I wanted to give this little house an abandoned and weathered look. Now, I think it's time to talk a little about this fellow here. There is a story behind it, of course. As I said before, it's a member of a group of 4 magical creatures. A sweet earth elemental with a hard body and a soft heart, an airy fox spirit that wanders as much in dreams as in the waking world, and an old witch tree, carrier of ancient knowledge. You can see the making of each one in the previous videos. So, this little house. You might be familiar with the witch Baba Yaga from Russian folklore and her house with chicken legs. Well, this is not it. It's a distant relative, and it was made by a painter. He decided to withdraw from the cosmic life and devote himself to the study of form and color in the nature. And that was what had been happening for quite some time, until one day the painter went out for his morning walk and never came back. The house waited for its human to return until it could wait no longer. So it decided to go search for him. Its will was so strong that it grew legs and began wandering in the woods, further from the path. Deeper and deeper, and that's when things started to change. The house started to change. Because this is what happens if you stray from a path, right? So the house discovered the pleasures and the terrors of the forest and the joy of running. It turned wild, a wild, free child, like Mowgli. After painting, I applied a deep green-black wash to enhance the cracks and blend the colors together. And after that, I dry brushed with white color to add some highlights and make the texture details stand out. The painting is finished, and I think this little house is actually starting to look like an old cabin in the woods. Now, let's make some glass for the windows. For that, I'm using the plastic lid from a food container. For the front windows, I used my original design to trace the shape. I cut it out and then started distressing it with my X-Acto knife to make it look like broken glass with lot of cracks. The rest of the windows are going to be seriously shattered, so I just cut out a bunch of jagged pieces. I weathered them using brown acrylics to give them a dirtier, more aged look, and glued them over the window openings however I felt like. As a final detail for the windows, I glued on some thin wooden strips to create the window grids, which I had previously painted dark brown. I used a bead from an old necklace as the door handle. It had this beautiful dark green color and really suited the whole aesthetic. To finish it off, I added a tiny broken piece of wood inside for that extra touch of realism. After that, I glued the house onto the wooden platform and the construction of the building was done. Now, this house has been in the woods for a long time. It's become part of the forest. I want that to show in its appearance. It's time to add natural wood, moss and wild plants to it. I picked out some pieces from my collection of broken little branches and started decorating the house with them. Moss was next in line. I glued a generous amount onto the branches, the walls and the roof. At the end, I glued on some artificial, well, it's not exactly grass, I'm not even sure what it is. I found it in a Christmas decoration package. Anyway, let's just call it artificial weeds. And with that, the upper part of the house was complete. Let's move on to the final chapter of this project, the legs. It's going to have long, bird-like legs made out of polymer clay, and I'm using a pair of chopsticks as the main element of the armature. One leg will be on the ground while the other will be bent. It's a beautiful pose often seen in birds with long legs, and I think it will make the model look more realistic. Plus, I want to give the impression that this cabin is moving along with the rest of the forest. As I mentioned, it's part of the Walking Forest project. I've tried to bring a sense of motion to every character I've created for this diorama. I believe that the pose I'm working on now will express that feeling better than a static stance, like having both feet planted flat on the ground. So I made the armature for the feet using chopsticks, and for the fingers I'm using crafting wire. The idea was to glue the wire on top of the sticks with hot glue and then secure it with aluminum tape, which, looking back, was a pretty stupid idea. I mean, aluminum tape? It tears so easily. So of course, the moment I started bending the wire to shape the fingers, the whole thing just fell apart. The foil tore to pieces. In the end, I just drowned it in hot glue and wrapped it in aluminum foil. After that, I went down a Pinterest rabbit hole looking for reference images, and finally started sculpting with polymer clay. When it comes to what type of clay I use in my projects, I usually prefer polymer clay over air-dry clay. The good thing about polymer clay is that it doesn't dry out on its own, so I can come back to it again and again whenever I have time. Unlike air-dry clay, which I have to keep moist in the fridge if I want to work on it later. Plus, I hate that dry feeling on my hands that air-dry clay leaves behind. I'm using Super Sculpey Medium. It's soft enough to make sculpting easier, but still firm enough to hold all the details. As I was browsing through reference photos, I started noticing that bird legs have a lot common with reptile legs. That got me thinking, so I did a little digging and found out birds are actually descended from dinosaurs, which totally explains why my neighbor's chickens always look like tiny feathered dinosaurs to me. Turns out the legs I'm making for my little cabin in the woods look like a weird mix between a chicken and a dinosaur. And I really like it. Using a heat gun during the sculpting process to partially harden finished areas while you are still working on the rest is a great tip I picked up from the YouTube channel Moonlit River Art. She's an amazing artist who creates figures inspired by Chinese mythology. You should definitely check her out, her magical creatures are absolutely stunning. So here we are at the final chapter of this project, painting these chicken dinosaur legs. I'm going for classic chicken colors, a deep yellow with some ochre shades for depth. I finished off the painting process by adding a black wash and classic white dry brush on top. For the final touch, I used artificial Christmas wood instead of feathers and glued it on the upper part of the legs. Okay, the legs are done, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. The bent one isn't as good as the straight one, but that's okay. I mean, they are my first chicken dinosaur legs, so I'm allowed to make mistakes, right? Once they were finished, I glued them onto my little cabin using hot glue. I even added some extra weeds around the bent leg, just to cover up the fact that it didn't come out quite as nice as the other one. And with that little cheat, my miniature cabin in the woods was complete. Let's take a proper look. What do you think of my little weird house? Did you enjoy the process and the video? If you did, hit that like button, or even better, drop a comment with your ideas for strange forest creatures. Or, even better, just do both. If you like fairy tale style crafting, don't forget to subscribe because there is more magical stuff coming very soon. Thanks for watching and being here. I really hope to see you in the next video where all my weird forest creatures will finally gather for one last project, the walking forest. Till then, I wish you great crafting adventures. See you next time!